Hello and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. My name is Prateek and I'll be taking up the News Today discussion for 19th of September. In the main news, we have the first news as Pakistan and Saudi Arabia signed mutual defense agreement. So in this news, we'll talk about the larger context of the agreement and we'll talk about the impact of this agreement on the Middle East or West Asian region and also on India. Second news, UN chief unveils Shifting Paradigms United to Deliver report. In this, we will talk about the larger theme of UN reforms and an initiative called UN80. Third, WMO releases State of Global Water Resources 2024. So here we'll talk about the major findings of WMO with respect to water resources. Particularly, we'll talk about the impact of climate change on hydrological cycle. Fourth news is about access to justice, where recently the Chief Justice of India had commented about the barriers that people face in accessing justice. And we'll also look into some of the ways in which these barriers can be overcome. In the last news, we'll talk about the Domestic Violence Act, which has completed 20 years. So in this, we'll talk about the major rationale for implementing this act, and we'll talk about some of the key features of the act and some of the criticism against the act as well. Apart from that, we will talk about UAE, which is in place in news, and we'll also have certain quick updates as well. Starting with the very first news, this is Pakistan and Saudi Arabia has signed mutual defense agreement. This belongs to GS paper 2, which is agreements affecting India's interest, okay? So on the face of it, this may not appear to be something that India is not directly a party to it, because India is not part of the agreement, okay? So whenever we read international relation, it is not just about bilateral relations such as India's relation with any particular country or any agreement where India is directly linked. It is also important that we take a look into all those major developments which has potential to impact India's national interest as well. So recently, India signed a lot of agreements with a host of countries, including with Israel, with respect to bilateral investment treaty. India has also upgraded its relationship to strategic partnership when it comes to Philippines, and India has also signed a free trade agreement with UK. Also, there are several things which are in pipeline, including a recent trade agreement which is going on. Discussion is going on with US, and also there is a trade agreement which is going to be signed with EU as well. Now, this news is something where India is not associated, but we can see that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia are part of this. So we'll need to understand what are the context or the background which has prompted these two countries to sign a defense agreement and what could be the potential impact on India's interest. So for this, we need to take into look about the context of the agreement. And recently, you may have heard that Israel has launched attack against Qatar. And this signaled the intensification of war in the West Asian region. And if you look at the map of West Asia, this will become very clear to you that why this development is important. It is because Israel is here. Okay, so Israel is right here. And then you have Saudi Arabia, and here you have Qatar. So if Israel is attacking Qatar, then definitely Saudi Arabia's airspace is also being violated, right? Also, we know that earlier, Saudi Arabia could rely on the support of United States for its defense requirements. But since 2020, US is gradually withdrawing from the Middle East or the West Asian region. In fact, after the President Donald Trump's again, who has reached to White House, now we are seeing that US is further withdrawing from the NATO regions as well, or from the European regions as well. So definitely the Saudi Arabia cannot rely on US as a security guarantor here. So definitely these two developments have prompted Saudi Arabia to enter into a deal with Pakistan. We also know that Saudi Arabia is a Sunni country and Iran is a Shia country. And this is basically, they have a conflict as well, a direct confrontation. ideological confrontation. So Saudi Arabia is also threatened by Iran and also by Yemen, which is headed by, or which has Houthis as the proxy of Iran's, right? So basically, Saudi Arabia is surrounded by several uh, enemies, as it will call it, and now because of the fact that Israel is further intensifying the war in the West Asian region, it now requires some sort of agreement with an ally, and therefore it has signed a defense agreement with Pakistan. Now, as of now, we do not know exactly what are the details of the agreement, but what we know is that there are two things which are present. First is that it aims to develop defense cooperation between the two countries, and the purpose here is to enhance deterrence, joint deterrence. So in international relations, the concept of deterrence means that that to increase the cost of escalation of war, right? So for example, if country A attacks country B, then it knows that country B is also capable of attacking country A, right? So therefore, A will be deterred from attacking country B, right? So this is basically how deterrence works. So basically, once you start developing your weapon system, your military system, part of the reason is that you do not want the other countries to attack you, because the other country understand that the cost of escalation will go very high. Now, why Saudi Arabia has chosen Pakistan? Saudi Arabia has chosen Pakistan because since 1960s, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have been cooperating in military ties. In fact, in 1979, Pakistan started training the Saudi Arabian, the various military officers, right? And they have also cooperated, and they have a bilateral security agreement as well. So essentially, this agreement gives legal sanctity to their relationship. The second important reason, or second important element of this agreement is very interesting, that any aggression against either country shall be considered an aggression against both. So essentially, this is very similar to the line adopted by or adopted in the NATO's paradigm, right? So NATO has this under treaty, or it has something called collective security. So it says that if a country launches war against one of its member country, it will be considered as a war against all the entire NATO, right? So basically, the same thing has been happening here as well. Okay, right. So let's take a look at the impact of the agreement. What exactly is the broader impact? So first thing is that it enhances the regional security of Saudi Arabia. And here we have already discussed that it provides defense postures against its rivals such as Iran. It also provides against Yemen's Houthis and also from Israel. That is one thing that it provides. The second thing is it also raises the concern of Pakistani nuclear umbrella that is going to be extended to Saudi Arabia. Now, this is going to heighten the risk of nuclearization in the West Asian region. So that is the second dimension, that is the nuclear dimension. The third dimension is with respect to shifting power dynamics, as we have discussed earlier, that earlier US used to be the power that was very much entrenched in the West Asian region, but now as it is withdrawing from that region, it is going to create a vacuum, and this vacuum essentially is going to be occupied by China. So China is slowly and steadily deepening its presence in the West Asian region. If we look at the impact from India's perspective, remember that Saudi Arabia is a very significant partner for India as far as trade or energy security is concerned, or also with respect to diaspora contribution or population. So if we specifically look into the relationship, so the implication for this is that Pakistan could leave or could leverage the pact as strategic deterrence against India. So it will basically create, or in this mind against Pakistan, that if India attacks Pakistan, or if there's a war breaks out between India and Pakistan, then perhaps Saudi Arabia will be able to join that war as well. Secondly, it may complicate India's balancing act in West Asia because India wants to deepen tie with both Saudi Arabia and with respect to Iran as well. And then there is another pole called Israel. So how does India balance its relationship with all these three major players? That would be a difficult task for India. Thirdly, it could also embolden Pakistan in context like cross-border terrorism, right? Because Pakistan will be emboldened by the fact that it has baggage or it has backing of Saudi Arabia. So perhaps it may strengthen its terrorist infrastructure. So these could be some of the implications of this agreement. Now we should also take a look at the broader India-Saudi Arabia relation. We have already discussed that it has significant economic relations, but it also has strategic relations in the form that there is a Riyadh declaration that was signed when PM Modi visited Saudi Arabia, and there is and within this, the relationship has now been elevated to strategic partnership, right? So first thing is strategic relationship. Second is economic, where the bilateral trade is approximately 42 billion, or let's say 43 billion US dollar. At a time when US has imposed sanctions on India, India is trying to diversify its export basket across the world. So this development should be again looked into this perspective that India wants to improve upon its export market. So this is a very significant market which India cannot afford to reduce any further. So, but at the same time, India is a net importer. India export is close to $11 billion, and the rest of them is import. But if you look at the import part, it is largely energy security, or largely it is based on crude oil. So Saudi Arabia is the third largest crude oil supplier to India, and it is key to India's energy security. Now again, this can come really handy because when US imposes sanctions on Russia, as of now there is no sanctions on Russian oil, there's a price cap. But what if US in the future imposes a specific ban on Russian oil supply? Then perhaps this can also play a very crucial role. Secondly, there is, if you look at the trading, the scale of trading, it is India is the fifth largest trading partner of Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is the fifth largest partner of India, and India is the second largest trade partner of Saudi Arabia. When it comes to remittances, it is 6.7% of India's inward flows, and if you look at the diaspora, it is close to 27 lakh Indians who are residing in Saudi Arabia for various roles. Okay, so these are some of the importance of or areas of cooperation between India and Saudi Arabia. So as of now, UPSC has not asked a direct question on this because obviously this is a very recent development, but UPSC can ask a question which is very much similar to this. So question can be, recently Pakistan and Saudi Arabia signed a strategic mutual defense agreement declaring that aggression against one would be treated as aggression against both. Discuss the implication of this agreement for regional security in West Asia and for India's strategic interest. Okay, so we have already discussed all these aspects. Let's now move to the second topic, which is UN Chief unveils progress report on structural reforms, program realignment, and this would be part of GS paper 2. Within this, we have important institutions, their structure, their mandate. So understand that UN reforms is a very key topic that is frequently asked by UPSC, and India has a very important role to play in this because India has certain aspirations, certain requests or demand with respect to UN reforms. And more importantly, UN reform is important because the global world order is now undergoing a lot of threats, not just the conventional security threats like war, but also threats, non-conventional threats like climate change, like trade wars, right, etc. So all these are also ensuring, or they want some sort of agreement that UN starts to take its affair into more order, and it also improves upon its working. So this is the reason why UN reforms is very crucial, and also because of the fact that UN was established in 1945 when Second World War was going to end, and at that point of time the reality of the world was completely different from the realities which is present now. So in light of that development, we need to have some sort of developments and reforms in UN that would enable it to play a larger role for the global governance of the world. When we look at this report, which is UN80 report, so we'll talk about what UN80 is. So in the UN80 report, it has provided 3 proposals, which essentially is governance proposal, or we can say that it is about global governance. And these governance reforms are very much similar to the reforms that is required in a typical institution, right? So more often than not, we'll see that there is sort of silos or work duplication of effort. So they have mentioned that they should reduce silos and duplication so that collaboration can be better and it can be also harmonious in nature. Second, there has to be some sort of structural and programmatic realignment for coherence. We need to have a clearer vision and we need to implement only those tasks which is required. Third, reforms should be aligned with UN Charter and rules. Okay, so all these 3 are the global or the 3 major vision or proposal for the reforms. Now let's take a look at what exactly is UN80. So if you guess 80 here refers to, so 80 essentially refers to the fact that it is the 80th anniversary of establishment of UN. So UN, I think, was established in October 1945, right? So October 1945. So from October 1945 to 2025, it is 80 years, right? So what reforms should UN take to ensure that it continues to be an effective agent for global governance? So all those initiatives, all those reforms are basically covered under the initiative of UN80, right? Now this is important because you know that League of Nations was established in the before United Nations, but it could not survive because of problems in implementation. So UN has certain structures, certain issues, or certain measures that enables it to ensure that it is able to implement its decisions very well, or charter works very well. So, but at the same time, there are certain issues with respect to its implementation paradigm. Therefore, these measures are suggested from time to time to make sure that it gets its house in order. So first, let's take a look at what exactly it is. UN80 is a system-wide push to streamline operations, sharpen impact, and reaffirm UN's relevance for a rapidly changing world. Okay, so this is essentially to make UN relevant. Second, it is divided into 3 work streams. First work stream is focused on improving the internal efficiency and effectiveness, what we discussed about not working in silos and ensuring collaboration. So internal efficiency. Second part is about mandate implementation. Now mandate is a technical term. What mandate is that it is a task that is assigned to the organization by the member states. So UN has approximately 193 member states. So when member states assign certain tasks to UN, that essentially is called as mandate. So there are several mandates, including thousands of mandates, which are sitting in across the UN Secretariat's office, but they do not know exactly in what order they should prioritize them and how should they develop them. So all these implementation review has to be done. Third, essentially, is about the nature of structural changes and program realignment. So we'll discuss what are these several initiatives that would be taken under this. So here, the focus areas. So we have discussed that first is that there are certain reforms with respect to improving its internal working and ensuring that there is collaboration. But if you look at the areas where they are working forward, first is peace and security, most important area. So if you look at the relevance of United States, one of the Secretary General of United Nations was Dag Hammarskjöld. So he said that UN was not made to usher heaven on earth. It was essentially to prevent earth into becoming hell. So essentially, the role of UN the most foremost role was to ensure that there is peace and security. But we have seen how, because of the ongoing wars in Russia, Ukraine, or with respect to the Israel-Hamas war, UN Security Council is not being able to fulfill its mandate. So first thing is that there has to be some sort of peace and initiative on security has to be done. And for this, there has to be fewer leadership layers, because that will ensure that decision taking can be faster. And there has to be some center of excellence for peace building, for incorporating women in peacekeeping operations, etc. Second aspect of area is about sustainable development. Now, sustainable development is quite important, because it is not just important to prevent the world from the scourge of war, it is also important that important developments like health, education, women empowerment are also given equal impotence. And for that, a collaborative mechanism is required, and for that purpose, sustainable development goals were provided by UN. Now, it is essential that there are certain mergers is required. For example, in terms of UNDP and UNOPS, they talk about infrastructure creation, etc. So their work can be harmonized and it can be streamlined. Then UNAIDS can be suspended in 26 because largely the mandate has been successful. Then joint knowledge hubs can be created. Third, human rights can be advanced where system-wide human rights growth led by the High Commissioner can be done. Fourth, new humanitarian compact can be produced, which would cut the bureaucracy and focus on the core areas. So these are the key areas of reforms. And if you look at the paradigm shift, or paradigm basically means ideological shift or idea shift. So what exactly are the two important areas? So first is with respect to technology. We know that technology is advancing like anything, and every day some new technology is coming up. So we need to ensure that technology along with data is imbibed in any sort of reforms that UN is taking up. So here it is essential that a separate data communication is done for United Nations. And secondly, the tech accelerator platform is modernized and it integrates data for better decision making. The second important paradigm should be should be respect to funding. And within this, pooled and core funding needs to be reformed. It needs to be aligned with priorities, and it should attract donors. So essentially, because of the fact that US has withdrawn from several of the international organizations such as WHO, so it is essential that the organization do not depend only on certain donor countries. It should be dependent on pooled donation, right? So this is why new donors should be attracted. They should be given certain stake there as well, right? So these are the larger reforms. At the same time, it does not, if you look at the nature of these reforms, it does not take into consideration the interest or the consideration of Global South, particularly India. So India has this demand that the UN Security Council should be reformed, and especially India should be given membership in the Permanent Council, right? So essentially, there is a group called G4, which includes India, Brazil, Germany, and Japan. So these countries are, they want to be part of Permanent Council of UN Security Council, and they also want some other reforms with respect to changes in the veto form, and also with respect to the way in which the funding is done, or with respect to Global South, agenda of Global South should be incorporated, all these aspects, right? So India has the arguments that because it is the largest democracy, and also because of the fact that it contributes heavily in the UN peacekeeping operations, India should be considered as part of the permanent member. At the same time, to counter G4, interestingly, there's a group called Coffee Group. Coffee Group was found, I think, way back in 2006, and it consists of some of the rival countries or so-called rival countries of these groups. This includes countries like Pakistan, Argentina, etc. Tell me all the other members of the coffee group in the comment section. Also tell me what is the other name of coffee group. Fine. So if you look at the previous year question, this year itself, UPSC has asked a question related to UN reforms, right? So in this question, the reform processes in the United Nations remain unresolved because of the delicate imbalance of East and West and entanglement of the USA versus Russia-Chinese alliance. Examine and critically evaluate the East-West policy confrontations in this regard. This is a highly analytical question which talks into the reason why the reforms of UN have not taken up. And one of the reasons why this has not taken up is because of the rivalry between two groups. One group dominated by US and the second group dominated by Russia and China. So, right? So because of the use of veto system, they are not able to induct any kind of reform in the UN, right? So here you can talk about other measures which can be suggested. You can talk about the initiatives by G4, etc. Next news, World Meteorological Organization, WMO, releases State of Global Water Resource 2024. And this is essentially part of GS Paper 1, which has a topic called Changes in Critical Geographical Features, which includes water bodies and ice caps. Equally, it can also be asked as part of GS Paper 3 in environment in terms of conservation of water and disaster management, etc. If you look at the report, at the crux of the report is that water cycle is becoming highly erratic. Erratic means unpredictable and extreme, that it is either going too high or it is going to the water supply is either too much, which is called deluge, and it is completely absent, which is drought, right? So basically it is becoming two things. It is characterized by unpredictability first, and second by extremity. That is the core message of this report. So if you want to just take away this message, that would be it. Secondly, it talks about glacier melt. So it gives evidence of glacier melt that this is the third straight year of global losses when it comes to glacier. Many small glaciers are at the or near peak water point. They are runoff to decline. They have been declining the runoff. Third, when it comes to river flows, they are declining again. 2/3 of the global catchments face too much or too little water. So basically, only in 1/3 of the global catchments, they have the same amount of water as it existed earlier, but in the 2/3 of the water bodies or the catchment areas, they have either too much or too little water. There is heavy rainfall in Africa, floods in Europe and Asia. You may have heard about the floods in Punjab, floods in recently in Dehradun, in Himachal Pradesh, in Uttarakhand, and so many areas in India. Then there is drought in Amazon, right? So again, there is some sort of extreme that is being witnessed here. So again, this essentially talks about the whole idea of water cycle. So water cycle is a concept that you study in either in your science classes or in your geography classes. So what it says is that water essentially moves, or there is a continuous flow or movement of water within Earth and atmosphere. It involves two things. It involves pools and fluxes. What is pool? Pool essentially is an area of storage. For example, lakes, glaciers on the Earth's surface, or groundwater can also be a example of pool, but it can also be in the atmosphere as well, right? For example, in terms of cloud can be given as an example of pool. Then there is another concept called flux. Now, flux essentially talks about water which is in movement, and this is basically governed by transfer between pools via evaporation, condensation, precipitation, etc. So we have different types of pools which stores water. So whenever water shifts from one pool to the other pool, there's a concept or there's a phenomena called flux that keeps on happening, right? So this is the idea of fluxes. Now, if you look at the impact of climate change on water cycle, first thing is because of warming of climate. In fact, if you look at the recent IPCC report, it says that there is more than 1.5 degree rise from the pre-industrial age. So definitely there is empirical evidence to suggest that there is global warming. So now what is the impact of global warming when it comes to water cycle? The obvious impact is that it has led to the faster evaporation of water. Okay. The second impact is that there is more water in the atmosphere, right? From the Earth's surface, water is now, there is abundance of water now as compared to Earth or with respect to atmosphere. So in atmosphere, there is more water. This is leading to extreme events such as precipitation, such as flash floods, such as all these things, or cloud burst, right? Now, this is extreme events can be in terms of droughts, heavy rainfalls, or hurricanes. There is also a rise in sea level, which is precipitated by melting of glacier. We have discussed how several glaciers are seeing decline of the snow. Then there is thermal expansion. Because of global warming, sea surface also tends to rise, and this is leading to what is called as coastal erosion and coastal flooding. So these are the broader impact of climate change on water cycle. Now, if you look at the PYQ, UPSC has asked a question with respect to examine the factors responsible for depleting groundwaters in India. What are the steps taken by the government to mitigate such depletion of groundwater? This came in 2025 mains. Again, you can talk about several anthropogenic reasons and several issues which has led to the depletion of groundwater resources. At the same time, you can talk about some natural reasons as well, which can be in terms of climate change, and you can cite the observations given by the World Meteorological Organization with respect to this particular answer. Moving on to the next topic, which is Chief Justice addresses barriers for marginalized and vulnerable citizens in accessing justice. This topic is part of GS paper 2, mechanism, laws, institutions and bodies for vulnerable sections. Now, when it comes to justice, right, it is inevitable that in any society there will be conflict. There can be conflict with respect to land or with respect to property, or there can be conflict between center on one hand or the government on one hand and citizen on the other hand, or there can be conflict between two arms of the government, maybe at the central level on one hand and the state on the other hand. So conflict is inevitable. The differences of opinion is inevitable, but what should be there is that the differences should not turn into dispute, right? So there shall be some way in which all these disputes can be resolved in a harmonious way and in the manner that is governed by law. That is why it is very essential that justice dispensation is available not just to the rich population, but also to all the section of the society, right? This is why justice availability and access is quite important. But recently, the Chief Justice of India, Mr. Gavai, has mentioned that a lot of vulnerable section and the marginalized section are deprived from the access of justice. And he has recommended that the lawyers who are now coming up from the various law colleges should be comfortable not just in the domain of law, but they should also be compassionate towards people. So if you look at the meaning of access to justice, it essentially means the ability of the state where every person can get judicial redress, and this should be done in a fair manner. It should be fair for everyone, for the rich population, for the poor people. It should be on the equal basis. There shall be no discrimination on the basis of your caste, on the basis of your religion, on the basis of your sex or gender. And it should be done in a speedy manner. It should not take you several years for a simple case to get resolved. Now, when it comes to the Constitution, there are three major articles which talk about access to justice. Article 14, Article 9, Article 21, and Article 39A. So what exactly is the text of Article 14? Article 14 says that state shall not deny to its citizens equality before law and equal protection of law. So basically the equality before law says that everyone shall be equal in the eyes of law. Article 21 basically talks about that state shall not deny to any person two things, basically right to life and personal liberty, except according to procedure established by law. And Article 39A essentially was not there in the constitution, but was implemented via the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976. And here this is part of directive principle. So Article 14 and Article 21 are part of fundamental rights, but Article 39A is part of directive principle of state policy. Now it says that it is the duty of state to provide justice to each and every section of society, right? And ultimately what it says is that justice should be dispensed to every section, irrespective of their financial or other disabilities. So it basically directs the state to provide justice to all the section of the society. Now when it comes to the barriers, so all of these noble vision of the constitution and the provisions in the constitution, despite all of that, we see that there are frequent issues when it comes to access of justice is there, right? What are these? If we break it down into various components, then we look into these aspects. So first is there is geographical barriers, which means that the courts and law schools are physically far from the rural or remote areas. So essentially they are concentrated in some pockets of urban areas, which deny the participation of people from rural areas or remote areas. So that is first thing. Second is with respect to linguistic barrier. So legal education and proceedings are dominated in English language, and we know there are very few people who are able to understand the legal language or the technical language in English. So this is again a major barrier when it comes to understanding the law process and understanding how law basically works in the country. The third important barrier is economic barrier. If you look at the legal education, it is highly costly in nature, and also there are two things. First is that the legal education is costly, so a person will take a lot of education to become, or it will be very costly for someone to become a lawyer. Secondly, the litigation expenses are quite too much, right? So if you want to get a good lawyer or a process, it will require you to get into some of the experienced lawyers, and their charges are too much, right? Fourth is in terms of social barriers with respect to caste system, illiteracy, lack of legal awareness. I think lack of legal awareness is one of the most important barriers. So a lot of people are not even aware of their basic rights. Forget about fundamental rights. They do not know about the fact that if what are the SOPs or standard operating procedures when police comes and investigate you or arrest someone. So if you do not know your rights, it is as good as you have succumbed or you have given up your way of protection, right? So it is very important that awareness is spread when it comes to legal education. Fourth, and the next one is with respect to other aspects, with respect to digital divide. Now access to technology, access to internet is very much limited to women or vulnerable section. So recently we had seen a report which said that only 25% of the women have access to internet, as opposed to men who have access to more than, or there are 57% of men who have access to digital or internet services. Then there is lack of physical infrastructure. Then we know that as per the recent National Judicial Grid data, there are more than 5 crores cases which are pending in the lower courts, and around 5 crores case or more crores case than that is pending in the Supreme Court. So if justice is delayed, it is said that justice is denied. So the first thing is that we need to make sure that these cases are at least addressed in the fastest way possible, so that the trust in judiciary gets maintained in the society, right? So these are some of the barriers that people have or the system has with respect to access to justice. When it comes to the initiative which has recently been taken for access to justice, apart from the constitutional provision, first we have National Mission for Justice Delivery and Legal Reforms. The basic idea is to increase access to justice and enhance accountability through structural changes. Second one is with respect to Legal Services Authorities Act. Now this act is in line with Article 39A, where we want to provide legal services to each and every section of the society, irrespective of their paying capacity. Within this, we have National Legal Service Authority, NALSA, then State Legal Services Authority, then Lok Adalat, which is an alternative way of dispute resolution. Then the third thing is e-courts mission mode project, which will be digitizing the courts and improving the transparency and accountability in the whole judicial process. If you look at the way forward, we know that these measures have addressed some of the areas which are leading to barriers in justice dispensal, but at the same time we also require certain more measures. So what more measures can be taken to improve upon the judicial access? So in this we can mention about linguistic inclusivity, which promote instruction and proceedings in legal or regional languages. Second, legal education reform, which should be provided through financial reforms or supports through scholarship, through stipends and fee waivers, so that it becomes available or accessible to people without the financial means to study law. Third, regional and local access can be done more through establishing more courts in the regional areas, law schools and legal aid clinics. And lastly, there should be technology integration, use of technology to deliver justice. This will ensure that the pendency of cases can be brought down. So if you look at PYQ, which has come from a topic which is very similar to this, is about NALSA, who are entitled to receive free legal aid, assess the role of NALSA or National Legal Service Authority in rendering free legal aid in India, right? So if you look at the NALSA Act, you'll see that they have mentioned women, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, population, or displaced population, or industrial workmen. So they have given a category of people who are eligible to receive legal aid. And in terms of the working of NALSA, it is essentially to ensure that it is providing legal education, it is helping the state legal Service Authority Act to ensure that legal service dispensation can be done in a speedier manner. It also helps in organizing Lok Adalat. So there are several functions that NALSA does. Next news. The Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act, PWDV Act, completes 20 years. And this is a very important development, and it is part of GS Paper 1, Role of Women and Women Organization, and Part 2, which is Social Justice. So here we'll talk about the basic objective of the Act, the rationale of the Act, some of the key features of the Act, and what are some of the concerns related to the Act. So the basic objective of this Act to prevent, safeguard female members from violence by the husband, okay? So this is the most important objective of this Act. And to substantiate this, there were several reports, and I have the report of 2022 of National Crime Records Bureau, but at the same time before also it was witnessed that women were at the receiving end of several crimes and tortures and physical assault through their in-laws and husband, and because of that there was a specific and a very remedial measure that was taken in forms of protection of women against domestic violence. So if you look at the Crimes Against Women report published by the NCRB, you'll see that around 4.54 lakh or close to 4.5 lakh crimes are committed against women, which are reported, out of which 1/3 of the crimes are committed through the partner, through the cruelty by husband or relative. So essentially they are domestic violence in nature, right? So 1/3 of the crime is essentially of the nature of domestic violence. So because of this reason, this Act continues to be relevant because, this is continuously increasing only, right? Despite several measures taken by the government and through several initiatives, right? Social initiatives, still there is a rise on domestic violence. Now, if you look at the provisions of the PWDV Act, The first provision is it defines domestic violence. And interestingly, it has not just taken physical violence as domestic violence, it has also incorporated other forms of violence, which includes sexual violence, verbal violence, emotional, economic abuse, plus harassment for unlawful dowry demands. All of them can be considered as domestic violence. Second is it provides for a way to implement its decisions. So there's an institutional mechanism, and for that it has created protection officers which will file incident report to magistrate. It will ensure legal aid and arrange safe shelter to the woman who is harassed. Second, there are service providers. Service providers, it can be legal aid, and they can provide medical or medical aids or financial and other assistance. Third, it provides for states, right, that states must register service providers, appoint protection officers, and notify shelters and medical facilities. So essentially, states will be regulating all these measures. Then what are the reliefs available to women? So protection orders, residence orders, custody orders, monetary reliefs, shelter, and medical facilities are available. And essentially, the most important thing which is available is residency rights. Every woman in a domestic relationship has the right to reside in the shared household. So the shared household residence cannot be denied to women just because, or for the fact that, or it cannot be denied to women in any case, and especially this is a right as per the Domestic Violence Act. If you look at some of the concerns related to this, the first concern is with respect to social and cultural obstacles, where it is generally considered that women should not name or shame or should not go complain against their husband or their in-laws, because it will be very much against the respect or the honor of the family. So basically, victim blaming happens not just at the level of the in-laws, but also at the level of the parents of the girl as well. Then there is economic dependence on the abusers, as a result of which they are forced to stay with that abuser. Secondly, there are structural problems like shelter infrastructure. So there's a limited capacity where they can be housed, right? And the conviction rates are also low, because invariably what happens is that women withdraw their cases because of several reasons, and this further affect it hinders or it prevents the effective protection. Then there are institutional barriers which are the low or lack of awareness. So recently we just discussed that there is lack of legal awareness in the country, and this also extends to the Domestic Violence Act. And there is inadequate training of protection officers which are not sensitized enough. Then there is misuse, where there has been an increase in number of false cases being filed against the act. And especially you may have heard about several social media events or incidents where such cases are being documented. Right? If you look at the questions which have come from this or which can be used, where this can be used, is first is explain why suicide among young women is increasing in Indian society. So here you can talk about the violence committed by partner, and especially about the fact that domestic violence has increased in India. That this can lead to several adverse effects, including suicides. Second, what are the continued challenges for women in India against time and place? Against time and space, so all across the time, for example, in the ancient time or medieval time, or also in the modern time, and also in the entire space, including the North India or South India, there are certain common challenges that women face. So you can list down them and you can talk about these problems. Next, let's talk about race in news. Here we'll be talking about UAE. And why it was in news? Because India-UAE high-level joint task force on investment meeting took place, right? So basically it's about economic investment meeting. So if you look at UAE, the political features, it's a federation of 7 emirates, right? So it's united, just like United States is a combination of 50 states, right? So they have, in UAE, there are emirates, and it is a combination of 7 emirates. It contains Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, etc. If you look at the bordering countries, what are the bordering countries? It has Saudi Arabia as one country, right? Then it has Oman. Oman is another country. Then in terms of maritime boundary, it has Gulf of Oman and then it also has Persian Gulf, Gulf of Oman and Persian Gulf, and then it also has some geographical feature. It is located in the eastern part of the Arabian Peninsula. It is in the eastern side. It is strategically located across Strait of Hormuz, and which is a key transit point for crude oil. If you look at the desert, it has a hot and humid climate in summer, warm and sunny in winter. It is cooler in the eastern mountains, and interestingly, Tropic of Cancer passes through UAE in this area, Abu Dhabi Emirate, right? So this is about places in news. Let's now talk about quick updates. In the quick update, the first news is about Chabahar Port. And why Chabahar Port was in news? It was in news because the US administration has recently said that it is withdrawing the sanctions waiver. So waiver granted to Chabahar Port in Iran, which is being developed by India. So US had exempted the Chabahar Port earlier from the sanctions in 2018, but now it's saying that it will be withdrawing the waiver. Now, about the Chabahar port, it's a deep water port located on the Gulf of Oman in Iran. It is the closest Iranian port to India, and interestingly, it grants India access to landlocked Afghanistan and also with respect to the other Central Asian republics, essentially bypassing Pakistan. It is also part of the international north-south transit and transport corridor. It connecting India to Europe, Russia, Central Asia. So it not just has the geoeconomic significance, but it also has geopolitical significance, right? Secondly, India AI Impact Summit in 2026. So recently, Ministry of Electronics and IT, Information Technology, has unveiled the key flagship initiatives for the India AI Impact Summit. And interestingly, it is being hosted by the Global South nation for the very first time. Now, if you look at the guiding sutras or the principles, it will be guided by 3 Ps, which is people, planet, and progress. And the discussions will be centered around 7 major themes, which are human capital, inclusion, safe and trusted AI, resilience, science, democratizing AI resources, and social good. If you look at some of the flagship initiatives, first is AI Pitch Fest, which is UDAN. Now, this UDAN is UDAAN, UDAN. It is different from UDAN, UDAN. Now, tell me what is the difference between this UDAN and UDAN, okay? To showcase innovative AI startups, right? So basically, it is a way in which other important, interesting AI startups will be demonstrated. Secondly, global innovation challenges, which will be done for youth, women, and other participants to foster AI-driven innovations. Thirdly, there is going to be a research symposium to forge international AI collaboration. So what is takeaway from this is that India AI Impact Summit essentially will be guided by these 3 considerations, and it will be focusing on the innovation and essentially including collaboration and challenges for youth and women. Third is reinforcement learning. So this is essentially with respect to DeepSeek. DeepSeek is an AI platform in China, and it shows that reasoning in large language models can be incentivized through reinforced learning. So when it comes to AI, there are 3 ways in which learning can happen, right? So AI can learn through supervised learning, or it can be unsupervised, or it can be reinforced. And this is done in a transformer. Essentially, transformer will be an element which contains certain inputs on one hand, and then it will provide the required output in the desirable format. Right? So what happens in the supervised learning is that a human being is involved. It tells the AI that, okay, this is one thing that we want to know. For example, if it wants to train an AI to understand that, okay, this is a dog, so it will tell the AI that this particular part is dog. So essentially, it is direct involvement of human beings, so it is a supervised learning. Unsupervised learning is that the human beings will not directly tell that this is dog, it will tell the several characteristics of dog, and then AI will figure it out from its own that this is dog. Now, what exactly is reinforced learning? So in the reinforced learning, it learns from various incentives, from various feedbacks, or from various rewards. So here, essentially what reward is that it will talk about that, okay, these characteristics are part of dog, and if it gets the correct answer, then it gets reward, right? So then it basically reinforces its learning. That is why it's called as reinforced learning, right? So essentially it is based on trial and error and in the absence of any form of guidance by human user. So this is important part, right? So this is all about the reinforced learning with respect to DeepSeek R1. Then we have this topic, maritime autonomous surface ships. And this was in news because of the fact that Project Swayat aims to develop the country's first indigenous autonomous vessel, that is MAS, which is Maritime Autonomous Surface Ship, led by Indian Register of Shipping IRS. What is MAS? MAS is a ship which to a varying degree can operate independently of human interaction, right? So essentially it is an autonomous shipping platform, and it has 4 degrees of autonomy, right? So in the first degree, ship with automated processes and decision making, it is degree 1. One that is remotely controlled, that is degree 2. Second, that is remotely controlled without seafarer, so a complete absence of any human being, that is degree 3. And fully autonomous, so it does not require any such intervention by human beings at all, that is 4th degree or degree 4. Next, blue ports. India recently signed an agreement with FAO, that is Food and Agricultural Organization, to strengthen blue port infrastructure in India, and this is being conducted in 3 places, in Diu, in Vanakbara, in Karaikal, in Puducherry, and in Gujarat, Jhaku, right? So what exactly is Blue Port Initiative? Essentially, it is to transform the maritime and the coastal areas into not just an economic area, but it also ensures that there is sustainable economic or social practices are done. All these relevant stakeholders are involved, and it is also environmentally sustainable. So this becomes Blue Port, right? And the objective is to help fishing ports become strategic platforms for local, national, and regional growth. Next, Advanced Authorization Scheme, AAS. And this was in news because one pressure group, or you can say that an organization called Indian Metrological Coke Manufacturers Association, the name is not important, but they have flagged the misuse of AAS. They have said that the AAS, or Advanced Authorization Scheme, has been misused. So what is important from this news is that you know the concept of AAS. So what exactly is AAS? AAS allows import of inputs duty free. So you do not pay duty for them because you promise them that you are going to use those import products for export purpose, right? So basically this is what AAS is, that essentially it is done for fuel, oil, and catalyst which are consumed in the process of production, and this is essentially done by or administered by the Directorate General of Foreign Trade under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. So that is what is required here. Next, a very interesting news and a very important development, that Puducherry has become the first union territory in India to achieve zero maternal mortality. So what exactly is maternal mortality? It means death of a woman while pregnant or within 42 days of termination of pregnancy. So this is the technical definition of maternal mortality. Of course, it is measured from the through MMR, or maternal mortality rate. So what is the SDG target for India? It is, or of all over the world, it is 70 per 1 lakh live birth. In India, we have 93 per lakh, 1 lakh live births. But there are certain states which have achieved the SDG goal of 70. These states are Kerala, Maharashtra, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Jharkhand, Gujarat, Karnataka, right? Next news is on manganese. So recently, MOIL, that is Manganese Ore India Limited, has started exporting of manganese ore as state trading enterprise. Now, what exactly is it is that Government of India has appointed MOIL as STE for export of manganese ore below 46% Mn grade from India. So essentially what it means that India is a very good, or India is a reservoir of the low grade manganese, and therefore for that purpose India exports manganese, right? And India has surplus of manganese ore of low grade fines, and for this purpose MOIL has been appointed as the state trading enterprise. If you look at the manganese resources, Odisha tops the total resources, followed by Karnataka. And when it comes to the leading producing state, it is Madhya Pradesh. So this is all about the news today for 19th of September. I hope you learn a lot from this and make sure that you attempt all the questions. Thank you so much and all the best.